I work at the local university med school in their family med clinic as a back office tech/nurse. I've been there for 4 months now, and recently had an experience that damn near scared the scrubs off me. I had stayed late, as I work with the department chair MD, and he has a ton of orders, labs, and patient paperwork that comes through on a daily basis, and it can easily get backed up. I was alone in this huge old building after the last remaining MD came to bid me good night and let me know they were leaving. I was sitting in my office and saw an older man in a white lab coat with white hair and a mustache walk by my window and down the nurses' hall. The building was slightly dark, as most of the lights were turned off in the front area, but it was obviously a physician. I thought it was the department chair MD, and thinking maybe he was needing something from me for a patient, I got up and followed down the hallway. As I scurried to catch up to him, he made a left turn down another hallway and ignored me calling out to him, which I found very odd. He then made a left turn into a dark exam room that had all the lights off. Thinking this strange and creepy, my heart started pounding, and I stopped dead in my tracks, afraid to follow. After collecting myself and dropping my balls a bit, I turned on my iPhone light and went into the exam room. I turned on the lights and found it to be totally cleaned and empty. In fact, the entire building was empty. I was so freaked out that I ran. Yes, I literally ran back to my office, and without even turning off my laptop or the lights, I grabbed my things and hightailed it out of there. The next day, I was trying to explain what happened to one of the other faculty MDs without sounding totally nuts, and I came to find out that one of the original faculty physicians that donated a great deal of his time and money to the university's medical school had recently passed away. And not only was he a regular in those clinic hallways for decades, but the room that I said I followed him into was in fact one of his favorite exam rooms to use when seeing patients in the community outreach clinic. I will never forget the look on both of our faces after exchanging my experience and his notes. Both of us looked a little worse for the wear the rest of the day, and neither of us have spoken a word of it to any other staff. I've had enough experiences in my adult life to know there's some weird stuff out there. I think if you accept it, you become more susceptible to it. I've posted precisely once before. It was well received. Well, enough to go again and tolerate the abuse, I guess. This one will stay with me until my deathbed. It was 2006, and I had been in the British Army for 14 years. I was married and we'd just had our first child. We lived in an army quarter outside the wire of a large UK military base. The married quarters were cheap, old but bearable. They were mostly revamped houses from the 60s. Our quarter was no different to the others around us, and we enjoyed living there, until after our daughter was born. That's when the activity started. At first it was subtle. Both mine and my wife's personal items kept going missing. Keys, money, lists, those sort of things. We didn't realize the frequency at first, but our arguing and accusations that the other one of us was hiding things increased quickly. We're pretty tight, my wife and I. I know when she's bullshitting me. When I'm going full-on asshole mode and she's adamant she hasn't had any involvement, then you know she's telling the truth. Whatever was lost always turned back up. Sometimes in obscure places in the house. Other times, somewhere you just searched. I think we knew something was off, but couldn't say it out loud. Our dogs were the next warning sign. We had 2 Alsatians. They were pretty chill with great temperaments, but at some point they stopped coming into our sitting room. Given the option, they'd sit in the hallway and watch us. If you coaxed them in, they were immediately uncomfortable. They'd lie side by side, staring intently at one specific wall. Slowly, they'd begin to growl at it. If me or the missus didn't physically intervene, they'd begin barking. I thought they were nuts, but now I realized they sensed what was coming. The night before our daughter's first birthday, we did the obligatory balloon blowing. We must have blown up 20 balloons or so, and left them scattered around the sitting room floor. I remember leaving the wife to finish it off while I had a bath. The wife came up and got in the bath with me, which I hated sharing. We chatted for a bit and got out together. We were drying ourselves, her in the bathroom and me on the landing. We both bent over, facing each other to dry the back of our legs. As we were arched over, a single balloon fell slowly between us onto the floor. I jumped out of my skin. We both did. I immediately blamed her. We're in instant argue mode as we try to figure out how a single balloon managed to get upstairs. As I'm telling the wife she must have brought it upstairs with it stuck to her from static electricity, she stopped speaking and just stared above my head. I knew instantly whatever she was looking at was not going to be good. I turned and looked up. Above me, our attic hatch, which we had never touched since living there, was open. I cannot tell you how vulnerable I felt. Naked, holding a towel, looking into the dark attic. All I wanted to do was run, but I obviously didn't. I think I asked quietly if she had opened the attic. She hadn't. To cut a long story short, we got dressed in a state of nervous panic. Never once did I take my eyes off the open attic. There was something in there, and it felt evil. We grabbed our daughter from her room and left the house. We spent the night at our nearby friends. I expected them to laugh as I explained what had happened. They didn't. I think our expressions conveyed the terror we had felt. The following day, we went back into the house in daylight. The balloon that should have been on the landing wasn't there. The hatch was still open, but the menacing feeling had gone. I mentioned it to the unit's welfare officer later that day, and he instantly agreed to move us into a different quarter. Turns out, 2 other couples had experiences in the house before us. The house has stayed empty ever since. So yeah, I believe in something. Comments welcome. I was around 9 when I experienced this. I was playing in my backyard while my mom planted flowers. We have a small fenced-in area connected to the house, then a small stretch of grass, and then the woods. The woods are a decent size and connect to a large nature preserve, so sometimes we have deer or coyotes in the backyard. I was in the fenced-in area playing with our dogs and digging around in the garden bed, trying to find worms and beetles, when I heard a cat start yowling in the woods. We have a bunch of stray cats in our neighborhood, and they like to hunt and play in the woods, so I didn't think anything of it. However, when a second cat began to yowl, I got worried. I assumed that they were fighting. I started walking up the steps to our porch where the back door was, so I could get my mom or dad. We had dealt with cats getting hurt before, losing eyes, ears, and tips of tails in fights. So I wanted to see if either of my parents would go back there and break it up, considering that I wasn't allowed back there by myself. I made it about halfway up the stairs when a third cat joined in, and I knew that something was wrong. I slowly made my way back down the steps and watched the woods. A fourth cat began to yell, and a fifth. I stopped counting after that. More and more cats joined in, creating a chorus of horrible noise that scared me badly. Then the dogs started. All the neighborhood dogs began to bark. They yipped, yelled, and growled right along with the cats. My own dogs freaked out as well, sprinting towards the fence and slamming into it, over and over, snarling and barking angrily, like someone was right in front of them. I was frozen in place, terrified. I waited for my mom to come out and break me from my trance, but she didn't. Later I learned that she had heard all the cats and dogs freaking out, but just ignored it. Suddenly, all of the animals stopped. It became dead silent. We had big families living all around us, ones with noisy children. We lived close to the interstate. We lived close to the mall. But all of that noise that was usually there was gone. Even the birds stopped chirping. I heard a twig snap to the far right edge of the woods and turned to look. That's when I saw it. All black, extremely tall, long arms that almost touched the ground, and long legs. It was unnaturally thin. It slowly walked across the edge of the forest, its arms swinging lazily at its side. The sticks under it cracked and broke with ease. It lifted its long, thin leg and stepped over a fallen log, one that, at the time, was higher off the ground than I was tall. Then it turned its head toward me, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. It didn't have a face. It was just a black void, the infinite void of space and time. We stared at each other, me not blinking as its face stayed turned toward me. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. The thing finally turned back towards the woods. It took a few more steps, breaking sticks and trampling dead leaves, and then disappeared into the trees. Once it was gone, I ran to my mom and told her about what had happened. She brushed me off. This is when she told me about hearing the animals but not doing anything. She chalked it up to my imagination. You see, I had gotten really into Bigfoot, watching all these documentaries and stuff. I wanted to see him so bad. I was actually pretty excited at the time, because I thought I had seen Bigfoot. I told all my friends, and everyone thought it was cool. It wasn't until a few years later that I realized that the creature I saw wasn't a Bigfoot. It didn't look anything like that. It wasn't a big, muscular, hairy man-beast. It was skinny and black and tall. It was faceless. I have no idea what I saw, or what saw me. If anyone has any ideas, please do let me know. I used to work shift work at a gas plant in my area. For those who don't know, shift work is a day and night shift with a day off in between. Wasn't a bad gig, except we always worked alone, which could get extremely boring, as well as hard if you ever needed help. The worst part about it was that the plant was located about 30 miles from any town, so if something major happened, it'd take a while for any help to arrive. Night shifts were from 7 to 7. We had issues with drug addicts stealing scrap metal and materials in the past, so we're always instructed to keep an eye out. One evening, I was on nights. I arrived and got everything done, and was set up to just chill the rest of my shift. Now I will say I am not a bad employee, but sometimes on the first night shift, I would catch a cat nap to hold me over. It was around 3 a.m. at this point, and I started to doze off. I remember opening my eyes from time to time, to glance over and check on all the equipment on the monitor. What I thought to have been hours was only minutes. I was very paranoid about falling asleep, due to issues or someone walking in. We kept the 2 entrances to the building locked after hours, and I never really went into a deep sleep per se. The slightest sound would startle me and wake me up. I heard something and opened my eyes. Someone was frantically banging on the door outside. Due to company policy, we were not allowed to have firearms, so I kept a long fixed blade knife in my locker. I grabbed it and went to the door. I looked outside and saw a bloody figure standing there screaming and holding his arm. I cracked the door with one hand and held the knife with the other. I asked, "What's going on? What happened?" The figure told me he rolled his car a few miles down the highway and needed help, bad. Then he went to screaming and groaning in pain. Me, being the paranoid person I am, said, "Hold on, let me go get my phone and call for help." I then closed the door and locked it, because the world is a crazy place these days, and you never know. I stepped away for maybe 20 seconds to go get my phone. I came back, and the bloody figure was gone. I walked out a few feet and peered around the corners, but saw no one. Bloody handprints littered the door where the man was beating on it. The rest of the night I continued to look around. I went up and down the highway and never saw the man. The next morning, I hear on the local news that an escaped convict was in the area, and all local law enforcement were on a massive manhunt for the individual. Was that him? The thought of never knowing is terrifying. I just recently finished a course for a healthcare aid certificate, and something really freaky happened to me at the hospice I was doing my practicum at. I want to start off by saying that I don't believe in spirits or anything paranormal, and I hadn't had anything happen to me in my life that would have changed my mind until this particular night. I worked an evening shift, and I was done and sent home at 11:30 p.m. I think it was my second to last shift until I was done with my practicum. I worked on the dementia unit. It was on the second floor, so in order to get out of the building, I had to take an elevator to the main level and walk down a really long, dark, creepy hallway to get to the entrance of the building. Before I go on, I wanted to remind whomever is reading this that the building I was working at was a hospice, so death was quite a regular occurrence there. Anyway, the hallway I had to walk down had rooms on each side. Some doors were closed and some were open, depending on the resident's preference. So as you walk by sometimes, you'd catch yourself looking into their rooms if the door was open. Force of habit being a healthcare aide. Now, since it was 11:30 at night, the majority, if not all of the residents, were sound asleep in their rooms. If the residents decided to sleep with their door open, there's enough light from the hallway to see into their rooms pretty well. As I was passing by one of the last rooms in the hallway, I looked in, and I saw a lady on her bed. The lights were off, and she was in a cat pose. It stopped me in my tracks. If you don't know what that pose looks like, Google Images will show you what I mean. Basically, she was on her hands and knees. I thought to myself, that's strange. Her neck and head were awkwardly bent upwards, and she was staring right at me. It was so scary. She was old, probably in her 80s or 90s. Her face had absolutely no expression. Her skin looked gray. Her eyes were sunken in, and her lips had a blue-black tinge to them. She didn't look alive, or even human for that matter. Keep in mind, the room was dark, with only the light of the hallway shining in. It made it even more unsettling. I also remember feeling cold. The room had cold air leaking out of it. There was also a smell, a really weird smell. It felt like I was in a scene of a horror movie, like the really, really scary part that makes you want to close your eyes, but you can't. With that being said, the building was a hospice, so a lot of sick and dying people reside in those rooms, some of which have dementia, so odd and strange behaviors aren't rare. I thought to myself, okay, calm down. There's a logical explanation for this. The poor woman is probably suffering from dementia and is confused at the moment. With a shaking, nervous voice, I said, "Hello, are you all right?" No answer. I thought the best thing to do was go grab an HCA or nurse to go assist her and make sure she was okay. I walked back and approached the nursing station. I told the nurse the room number, 304, and what I had seen. We're all very accustomed to seeing bizarre things in this field of work, so there was no need to go into much detail. I pretty much just said, "There's a lady in room 304 that's awake. She might need some assistance." The nurse looked at me funny and told me that there was no one currently living in that room. I thought I may have gotten the room number wrong, so I took her there. We both looked into the room, and the woman I saw was not there anymore. What the fuck? Am I going crazy? We turned on the lights. Nothing. Just an empty room. It was clean and the bed was made. The blankets and sheets were perfect. Surely they would have been messed up. There was only a 2-minute window from the time I left to the time I got back, and I can assure you that everyone who lives at that hospice cannot be fast enough to be able to remake the bed and get out of there in time for us to not see them. Initially, I was embarrassed, so we started to think of an explanation. Maybe one of the other residents got confused and snuck into the room, but there was no one awake. Everyone was accounted for. At this point, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I was completely baffled. I didn't even have time to properly freak out because I was questioning my own sanity. As we walked away, she told me that the lady who lived in that room passed away the night before. She said the poor lady was found in the strangest way, face down, in a slumped-over cat-like position. It's safe to say that I did not sleep that night. I was so disturbed when I got home. I never wanted to go back. Still to this day, I wonder if I saw her spirit or ghost. I'd like to say that it could have been my mind playing tricks on me after that long shift at the ward, but I know what I saw. She was there. Hey guys and ladies, thanks for watching. Links to all my shit are down in the description. Be good to animals, even people. See ya.
Já, snemma, bergsbus, hreish.
The poor woman is probably suffering from dementia and is confused. The poor woman. With a shaking, nervous voice, I said, "Hello, are you all right?" And she went, "Ah!" I scared Ripley.